HaRav Tzvi Pesach Frank, Zeichet Tzadik Livracha, who lived from 1873 to 1960, the famous Rav of Yerushalayim, author of the Sfarim HaTzvi and Mikrei Kodesh, was one of the greatest poskim of the previous generations. He demonstrated how you should accept any Yid the way he is and avoid criticizing him, and in fact, this is the most effective way to be makar of another Yid. There was a daily minyan for all tefillas in the entranceway to his home at 28 Malachi Street. One day, as the Rav sat and spoke with people, the door swung open, and in the doorway stood a person with long hair, no yarmulke, and short pants. "When is mincha?" the man asked. The Rav replied, "In another 10 minutes." 10 minutes later, the person was back dressed the same, but with a crumpled yarmulke atop his mane of hair. He approached Rav Frank and asked, "Could I daven before the Amud?" The Rav said, "Sure." He put on a tallis, approached the bimah, and davened mincha and then mariv. He said Kaddish, of course. After davening, he asked what time Shachris was. The Rav told him it was at 7 a.m. and he left without another word. Some of the people who were present asked the Rav why he allowed such a person to be the chazan, and he answered that whoever wasn't pleased was welcome to find themselves somewhere else to daven. Then he explained that he allowed the person to daven because if he wouldn't allow it, then nobody else would either. The next day the man came for Shachris, this time dressed in long pants and with a nicer yarmulke on his head. He donned tefillin and was the chazan for Shachris, but left before anyone could approach him. This continued for 2 weeks. He came for each tefillah and left immediately afterwards. One day, he remained behind for a few minutes after davening, and the Rav asked him who he was. Instead of answering, he said, "Rabbi, you won me." The Rav asked what he was talking about, since he'd never really spoken to him before. The man said, "Surely the Rav remembers the day I came here to daven for the first time. It was the day that my mother was nifter at the age of 96. I loved her very much. Although I myself live on a kibbutz near the Dead Sea and I am irreligious, my mother called me before she was nifter and asked me to promise her that I'd say Kaddish for her neshama. I shook her hand on the deal. But after the levaya, I made a stipulation. I decided to enter the first shul I would bump into. If they would let me daven as the chazan as I was, with short pants, I would continue to daven and say Kaddish for my mother. But if not, then I would be absolved of my promise and would not recite Kaddish. By allowing me to daven, you won me." Rav Frank hugged the person, who began to cry. He then left the house and did not return for a few weeks. Rav Frank was afraid that somehow he distanced him. 2 weeks later, he returned with a fresh haircut according to halacha, dressed in a hat and a jacket. He looked like a regular religious person. HaRav Frank asked him where he'd been. He answered, "After you showed me such acceptance and such love, I decided to do teshuvah. I traveled to my kibbutz, settled all my businesses there, and I returned to Yerushalayim. Today, that person has frum grandchildren living in Yerushalayim."